Well, as you know, the Supreme Court has now made a decision that the Defense of Marriage Act, better known as DOMA, is unconstitutional, and as it relates to federal benefits. Now, what does this mean? And then it goes on to make no decision on Proposition 8 in California, which means the Proposition appeal stands, at least as it is considered by some of the lower courts in that state. All of this is very confusing, but it also opens up the door for same-sex marriages to rapidly expand throughout the United States, even though over 30 states say that the definition of a marriage is between one man and one woman. I hold in my hand here a book entitled What is Marriage? Man and Woman, a Defense. And you can get this, I'm sure, online, and you may want to check that out. One of the co-authors and contributing authors is a gentleman by the name of Dr. Sherif Girgis, and he's also a student of philosophy at Princeton University and a JD candidate at Yale Law School, so pretty extensive with his education. Sherif, nice to have you with us, sir.
Nice to be here.
Well, yesterday was a big day when the Supreme Court ruled DOMA unconstitutional as it relates to federal benefits. What's your response to yesterday's decision?
Well, I think it's got a lot of problems. I mean, it leaves us space. The most important thing to see is that it does leave us space to continue to define marriage as the states see fit. It's not a Roe v. Wade on marriage. At the same time, it does plant the seeds for such a case because it starts to say, it just attributes the DOMA support, and you can easily extend that to traditional state definitions, to animus, bigotry, that bear desire to harm or injure. It does that, of course, by not engaging with any of the arguments for DOMA or conjugal marriage laws. But that's a very significant precedent, and I think whether the court acts on it in the future will depend on what people do in the meantime.
All right. It made no decision on Prop 8 in California. Now, if I understand that correctly, Sherif, is that that means that the lower court ruling, not the Ninth Circuit, the District Circuit Court, but the lower court ruling, that appeal stands. Is that correct?
It's actually arguable. So
okay.
what we know for sure is that the Supreme Court didn't make any decision on it, and that the Ninth Circuit decision has to be set aside as well. What's unclear is whether that leaves the trial court one intact, or whether it actually requires that one to be vacated too, in which case couples would have to apply individually to get same-sex marriage licenses. Anyway, it's such a mess, but pretty much, especially with Kamala Harris and Jerry Brown as the administration there, it's pretty clear that there will be most likely same-sex marriage licenses in California pretty soon, and that there won't be an immediate effect on other states.
Yeah. All right. How does this affect children? I mean, to me, well, I'll hold my personal comments, but it appears now that this is such front and center conversation as it relates to family life that it's got to have an adverse effect on children.
Yeah, I think it does in a couple ways, or at least it would double down on trends that have already had an adverse effect, and that in fact had nothing to do with same-sex anything. So, just for example, a no-fault divorce. You know, everybody thought, well, that's not going to affect you or your marriage or anybody's kids or anything. It's just for high-conflict marriages, it would make it easier to get out. But in fact, it actually changed marriage to some extent for everybody. It made people more likely to keep their eyes on the exit ramp, which made them more likely to take it. And that undermined permanence to some extent for everybody, which hurt kids. But I think we'd be doubling down on that vision of marriage, that marriage is mainly about adult emotional union, not about the needs of children, that you should get out of it when you don't have the emotional union because that's inauthentic, to stick with it. You would also be adding a new lesson in our law, which is that moms and dads are interchangeable. And that lowers the motivations for people to stick with it for the kids and things like that. It really ends up undermining the norms, the stability of marriage that make it so valuable to the common good.
You know, it just seems to me that the whole social argument of marriage now, it's going to make children at very young age to ask those questions. What is a gay marriage? What does this mean? I mean, normally they wouldn't be asking questions at young ages like that, but now that it's part of the whole social fabric, they begin to ask those kind of questions, and then those seeds are now planted into their little hearts and minds.
Yeah, I think, there's no way of insulating ourselves from the culture, and that's why we all have a stake in how the culture goes.
Yeah, no question about that. So where do you see this argument going? I mean, there was an article today that says that those who are very happy about yesterday's decision, that this is the beginning now, that their goal is all 50 states. Would you think that that's inevitable?
It's not inevitable. I think it really just depends on what happens between now and then. I mean, if the court thinks that it's going to get a huge blowback from that kind of decision, it's going to be more wary about it. And then the way we know that is yesterday. They had the chance to do that, and it's pretty clear that 5 justices are very sympathetic to the cause of redefining marriage. They did not because they didn't want another Roe v. Wade on their hands. Now, whether they think that will be a Roe v. Wade 5 years down the line depends, again, on whether supporters of this understanding of marriage stick up for their views.
Wow. All right. So, was it 30 states now still define marriage between a man and a woman? I would assume that those are going to be challenged, but can federal law trump state law on that issue?
Well, it's, you know, the challenge will be based on the Constitution. I don't think the Constitution has anything that contradicts these state laws. It doesn't take sides in the debate between which vision of marriage to enshrine in our law. And when it is just a debate between these two substantive visions, equality can't get you anywhere either. Equality says apply that vision on an equal basis once you figure out what it is. It can't tell you what marriage is or why we ought to recognize it.
All right, so of course your book deals with this, and the book is entitled What is Marriage, Man and Woman, a Defense, and Sherif is one of the contributing authors to this. It appears to me that same-sex unions are certainly going to be here to stay as it relates to the receiving of benefits, and that seemingly is where all of this is going to end up going. Do you see states who still define marriage as a man and woman give way or be forced to give way to accept same-sex unions as it relates to benefits, both state and federal?
Well, I think there will be pushes for that, but, you know, the focus has really shifted away from civil unions in general. Because this debate isn't really for either side simply about practical benefits. I mean, if there are needs that people have in virtue of sharing a home, then we should make them available to anybody who shares a home, if they're not already available by private means. This is really for both sides a debate about what vision of marriage the state's going to enshrine in law.
Now, throughout your book, you pretty much warned that these decisions are certainly threatening marriage and weakening marriage, and to date we see the effects of that. What do you see in the future as far as marriage is concerned?
I think we're definitely going to see a lot of legal challenges to state marriage laws, just as you say. We're going to see, and again, how they come out will depend on whether people buy the argument that this is inevitable, that they ought to shut up because it's all fixed anyway, or whether they stand up for their views in truth and in charity and with civility, and then but the other thing is we don't just fight a legal battle. I mean, the whole point of this is happy marriages and families, and that takes a lot more work than this. This is just preserving the conditions for us to be able to do that and to pass on our moral principles and so on.
Well, I'm concerned about that, obviously. And then the other thing is, I guess as it relates to children, same-sex couples who bring children into a relationship, or how this may affect the procedure in the future concerning adoptions into these same-sex marriages. I mean, this just really tears the traditional family apart.
Yeah, I think that it definitely undermines the stabilizing norms of marriage, and it suggests that there's nothing special about moms and dads, and there's nothing special about your own mom and dad in particular, that really consent is all that makes a marriage, or all that makes a family. And I think that in itself, though it has a kind of superficial appeal, ends up really undermining some of the ideals that make that have a very strong connection to the common good.
Is this battle over same-sex marriage, can it be categorized as a civil right? I mean, I know that's where they want it to be, but does it legitimately fit the description of a civil right?
No, I don't think so, because civil rights, those are about equality. As we said earlier, equality isn't going to move you 1 inch towards either marriage policy here. People often make the comparison to anti-miscegenation laws. but bans on interracial marriage, in other words. But those were meant to oppress a particular minority. There's no way that the marriage as the union of a man and a woman was introduced to oppress anybody. First of all, it was introduced in every society independently. It was introduced it arose, it developed pretty organically, I think, in societies that had very favorable attitudes towards homosexuality, in societies with all kinds of religious and moral views. There's just no way. They all thought, whatever they thought about same-sex anything, and even if they didn't, because they didn't have the concept of a sexual orientation, they thought that marriage was about bringing men and women together for family life.
Well, thank you for your work. And again, the book is entitled, What is Marriage, Man and Woman, a Defense? And you can pick it up online, I'm sure, at the bookstores. And even Dr. Rick Warren, Purpose Driven Life, has endorsed this book as a great read. So, Sherif, thank you for being with us. Keep up the good work, my friend.
Thank you.
Okay, we'll be right back.